the topic today is going to be natural disaster readiness and risk reduction tactics. And I will be your presenter. And my name is Greg Zawi, and I'm a senior risk control consultant, here at HAI Group. A little bit about HAI, for those of you that don't know, I'm sure that most of you do, but HAI is a family of companies founded by and dedicated to housing. We protect, we preserve, and we promote the sustainability of affordable housing. As it shows in the slide here, we offer insurance, research, advocacy, and training to meet the needs of over 1,400 housing organizations and more than 12,000 housing professionals across the country. There's my mugshot there when I had a full beard and a little more hair. So I just recently got a haircut, which was good. And if any of you need to reach me, my information is there, gzawi@housingcenter.com. And when we do these presentations, we really, really, really value your feedback. There's a couple ways to feedback. We've got the QR code here, and this screen will also come up later in the program, but I just wanted to prep you. And we would really appreciate if you would give us your honest feedback on the course content, on my skills as a presenter, whatever it is. We're going to give you the QR code or the link, and if you could just please, at the end of the presentation, provide us with your feedback. So, all right, let's start rolling. The first hazard we have is hurricane preparedness. For those of you on the East Coast, the Gulf Coast, and even inland, we've seen hurricanes that have hit the coast with a lot of ferocity, but then they travel inland and they seem to pick up speed and leave a lot of devastation in their wake as well. So this will be the first topic we talk about, and we have a couple pictures here. We see the picture on the left is the actual hurricane from space, and you can see the cyclonic both ways of the wind movement into the and then the eye in the middle of the hurricane. You see that right there, and then on the right you see the devastation that the hurricane has left. And primarily what ends up happening with hurricanes, and we'll see in the next couple of slides, is we have what's called the storm surge. And typically that happens in coastal areas, and that's what we're seeing in this picture here on the right. We're seeing the storm surge of the water that's brought in with the hurricane, and it creates a whole plethora of problems with flooding and such. So hurricane preparedness, what do we do? What do we do about a hurricane? And here's another satellite view. It looks pretty ominous from space. And I personally have never lived through a hurricane. I've never lived in a hurricane ravaged area. But I've heard that it's not something you want to do every day. So what is a hurricane? So answer. When a rotating low pressure tropical cyclone storm reaches a sustained winds of 74 miles an hour. 74 miles an hour, okay, that's fine. But, we know that hurricanes go much faster than this. So 74 miles an hour is the minimum classification for a hurricane. And 74 mile an hour winds are pretty darn fast. So why are hurricanes so devastating? I mean, hurricane winds can cause significant property damage, sending objects airborne, turning them into destructive forces that damage everything in their path. During hurricanes, the leading cause of death is water from either storm surge, which I mentioned before, rainfall, which accompanies the storm itself, or high surf. We've all watched the Weather Channel, and we've seen the stop signs flapping back and forth and things flying through the air, and that just gives you an indication how devastating these storms can really be. So another question: when's hurricane season? And yes, there is a hurricane season for those of us who don't live in those areas. And the answer is in the Atlantic and Central Pacific, hurricane seasons are from June 1st to November 30th. And then in the Eastern Pacific, the hurricane season is from May 15th to November 30th. Hurricanes have 5 categories. Categories 3 through 5 are considered major hurricanes. And the scale is the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale. And we've all heard of the hurricane category 1, category 2, category 3, category 4, category 5. And this gives you an indication of, how severe the hurricanes are. Hurricane category 1, we've got 74 to 95 mile an hour winds, which is still pretty bad, but it's the least bad of all the hurricanes. And we go all the way up to category 5 with 157 miles an hour winds or higher, and the damage is catastrophic. Just to put it in perspective, for those of us who remember Hurricane Katrina back in 2005, Hurricane Katrina had sustained winds of 175 miles an hour. And it hit the Gulf Coast with a vengeance, specifically New Orleans. And everything broke loose. The levees broke, the water came, the winds, and it was just a horrible, horrible, catastrophic storm. I had a colleague at the time who was living in New Orleans, had been a New Orleans resident his entire life, and Katrina actually prompted him to move to Arizona. It was so bad. And he was cut off from the world for about 3 weeks. We wired him money as a team because the banks weren't open, everything was shut down, and it just gives you an indication on how disruptive a hurricane can be. So as far as preparing for a hurricane, what do you do? What do you do at your housing authority? What do you do for your own personal residence if you are preparing for a hurricane? For those of us that live within the hurricane zones. And I guess I should backtrack. Typically in the United States, hurricanes hit the eastern seaboard, all the way from Maine through Florida, and the Gulf Coast primarily. Then they swing up through the country. We get runoff in the Midwest from hurricanes. Hurricanes aren't such a thing in California. They've got different things like wildfires that we'll talk about later. But a hurricane in the Western Hemisphere is the same as what a cyclone is in the Eastern Hemisphere. So in the Pacific, like in our like Hawaii, Japan, they get cyclones. And it's just a cyclonic action of the winds, and that's what it's named by. So what can you do before a hurricane hits? Oops, pardon me. Inspect your property. Now make sure that you have removed anything that's going to blow away. Secure things that high winds might move. Loose signage, pipes. Those of you that have high-rise buildings, definitely make sure those antennas are secure on the high rises. I know a lot of those are monitored by the companies that own those antennas, but ultimately they're on your property. So, if you see that, you've got a Verizon cell phone panel that's looks like it's flapping in the wind up there, you've got to make a plan to get that fixed before the hurricane comes, because it's going to blow away if you don't. Secure windows and roofs that lack structural integrity. You see in the picture, the gentleman's putting plywood up on the windows. That's a huge one. When I was working for another carrier, I had the opportunity to go down to the Outer Banks in North Carolina, which is also big hurricane territory. And I really never was aware of what hurricane shutters were until I saw them in action. And they are a very good thing to have on your structure. But in lieu of hurricane shutters, good old piece of plywood works well as to keep something from flying through those windows and breaking them as well. Collect emergency building and survival materials such as your documents, shovels, flashlights, batteries, battery-powered radios, first aid kits, et cetera, et cetera. Just your basic sustaining life items that you need in the event you have to go somewhere. Okay, the hurricane hits. What do we do? You see the picture of all the cars getting out of Dodge. Those are the people that waited around to the last minute, and they're all in a traffic jam. One of the nice things that we have about hurricanes, if there is an upside to them, is that they're able to be predicted well enough in advance so that you can take cover and you can get out of the path of the hurricane. And that's one of the things that I think that throughout this presentation that we have to look at, is that a lot of times just using good common sense is going to help you out in a situation, whether it be a hurricane, whether it be a tornado, whether it be wildfires, whether it be whatever. Just using your head is going to help you out. In addition to that, we are a technologically based society, and we are bombarded with information. And in the case of weather emergencies, this is actually a good thing. I know we get sick of watching the Weather Channel, and we see Jim Cantori out there with the stop signs flying by him. But the 24/7 sensationalism coverage, if you will, does have a good side to it. It keeps people informed. It keeps people abreast of the situation on where the hurricane's going, where the wildfires are going, or whatever natural disaster is occurring. So, being informed is always a good thing in these situations, and it could help save your life. With that said, pay close attention to emergency information and alerts. If the authorities issue evacuation order, ensure staff and residents are aware and follow the order immediately. If you're in a housing authority and you're in Miami and they said that it's bearing down on Miami, the hurricane is imminent, you need to move your people and not wait until the last minute like the people in the photo. It's going to be hectic enough. It's going to be congested enough, well enough in advance. You don't need to wait till the last minute. If no order is issued, inform staff and residents to stay inside and away from windows, skylights, and glass doors. Again, the obvious. If the hurricane blows out the window, you're not going to want to have your residents or yourself sitting by a window, a skylight, or a door. So just again, using your head, using your common sense, if you will. I mean, it's always good to stay in touch with the local authorities. Be aware of what emergency hotlines may be backed up due to call volumes. Once the approval is, given by the authorities to come back on site, execute return procedures for staff and residents. If feasible, engage with your residents through a video or phone calls to provide updates on the property. And when they come back, if there is devastation, like shown in the photos here, we want to make sure that people are cognizant of their surroundings, and we want to keep away from any down distribution lines. We want to keep 33 feet away at least, which is the length of a school bus typically, from down distribution lines. And the reason being is because electricity goes in waves. And think of it as, if the wire is on the ground here, the wave is really high, meaning that there's a lot of electric current. As it dissipates and goes away, by the time it hits 33 feet, it's flat. It's not a wave anymore with a lot of current. It's pretty flat. And the chances of you getting injured are pretty nil. And this goes for both hurricanes as well as any sort of storm where power lines have been down, especially when there's water. And you also have to realize that anything that conducts electricity, you're going to have to stay further away from the down power lines. I mean, we always see in the movies of, the dancing electrical power line. That's really not a scenario that happens too often. We have more of a scenario where the electric current from that down power line that's dancing around over here electrocutes somebody over there because they're either touching a piece of metal, they're in water, and that's where you have the problems when it comes to with the down power lines when it comes to the water situation. And this is very prevalent in hurricanes, very prevalent in flooding. Anytime where there's water that's sitting on the ground and down power lines, you have to be very, very, very aware of your surroundings. So never walk or swim or drive through floodwaters. Just 6 inches of moving water can knock a person off their feet. A lot of people have the misnomer that I'm in a car, I could fly through this and I'm all good. Especially in floods where there's moving water, that can be one of the most dangerous things you can do. If you can't see the ground and that ground's over like 6-8 inches of your tire, you should not go through that water. Beware of lightning, stay away from electrical equipment. I just explained that as far as like the down power lines. You have to be very, very careful and aware of your surroundings about the down power lines when they're in the event of a storm. If trapped in a building by flooding, obviously go to the highest level. Do not enter a closed attic because you can be trapped within the attic. Always have to give yourself a form of egress to get out. So that's pretty much it with hurricanes, and segueing into what does the hurricane leave us with? It leaves us with water. Well, when we have a flood, that's either standing water, rushing water, what have you, and it's either done by a good old-fashioned rainstorm or a very severe storm like a hurricane. And when we have flooding, it's meteorologists. They pretty much monitor weather across the entire country and look for conditions that are favorable for storms to occur. And so again, it's important to listen to your local news and weather to hear about potential storms. And for your entity as a housing authority, it's a great idea to bookmark your city or county website for quick access to storm updates, or have a very close relationship with your county, because they will have direct tie-ins to the National Weather Service and other entities like that. We also send out reminders to prepare for potential severe storms to our members in the affected areas. So make sure you're reviewing your emergency plans before the storm hits. It should be part of your business continuity plan, an emergency preparedness plan. So, what do we do in case of a hurricane? What do we do in case of a hurricane and then we have a flood? Or what do we do in case of a flood? Or if your area is more prone to tornadoes, what do we do for tornadoes? So those should be components of your emergency planning. When you have that emergency plan, contingencies should be in for natural disasters as well. So flood preparedness. There's more areas that are prone to flooding than others. And we've all heard the term floodplains, flood zones. FEMA has a searchable flood map database, and you can click on this within this presentation, and it will take you to a map, and you can see if your properties are located within the flood database. So it's always good to know whether you have a higher propensity for flooding. And FEMA usually rates these on a 1 to 10 scale, with 1 being the least likely to be flooded and 10 being the most likely to be flooded. So it's always good to know where your properties lie. And again, a lot of people don't need a flood map database to know where their properties lie. And again, before the flood happens, there's things that you would need to have in your plans and your your daily workflows to make sure that in the event of a potential flood, that we've got everything in place to help mitigate our damage and help mitigate this disaster. Because you're not going to stop it. You're not going to stop the water. You're not going to stop the rain. You're not going to stop the hurricane, but you can mitigate the damage that's caused because of it. Inspect your drains and sump pumps regularly. Make sure they're in working condition. These are things that you do on a regular basis that can help you when it comes to these disasters and help to mitigate the losses that are derived from these disasters. Make sure all necessary employees know how to shut off utilities during an emergency. Little things like that. I mean, that's something that a lot of people don't know how to do. You want to make sure that your site managers know that, okay, so in the event of a flood, this is where the electrical shutoff is. This is where the boiler shutoffs are. This is where we go, to look for those components of our building. And it's not just the maintenance people that need to know that. You need to have your management staff know that. You need to have people that are available to be able to act in the case of emergency. Again, we talked about this before, but avoid floodwater that may be electrically charged from underground power lines, and avoid floodwater that may be hiding dangerous debris or contamination. The rule is if you can't see it, don't go in it. And should you incur damage from a storm, always take photographs and contact your insurance representative as soon as possible. All the claims that occur because of water, flooding, etc., must be reported through our website's claim portal. And it's really important that we get these submitted right away so that we can get out and we can investigate the cause, we can settle the claim, and we can get you back whole and get you working again to serve your residents. Hail and windstorm. So we have the third natural disaster. And this is one that kind of is in my roundhouse. This is more of a Midwestern thing in the United States, even though it does happen in the entire United States. I know our friends out there at Kansas City who are on the call, they can appreciate the whole hail thing because typically in the center of the country, we get some pretty wicked hailstorms. So the hailstorms have the potential to wreak havoc on your properties. Little footnote here that losses relating to hailstorms in the U.S. average between $8 billion and $14 billion a year from 2000 to 2019. And there have been more than 8,000 large hailstorms within the last 2 years, including one that produced hailstones bigger than grapefruit and punched holes through roofs. So it's pretty devastating as to what hail can do. You kind of think of it, oh, it's just kind of like snow. Well, no, it's really not. It's kind of like, depending on how large the size of the hail is, it could be the size of a pea gravel or the size of a grapefruit, and it can be traveling pretty darn fast when it comes out of the sky. So we see some pictures here of some vehicles that have been damaged by hail. Kind of looks like a shotgun blast in some cases. We've got siding that was damaged by hail here, and we've got the hail on the front windshield of the car. So hail's one of those. It's deceptive. Hailstones can fall at speeds between 25 and 40 miles an hour typically, and in the strongest storms can reach 70 miles an hour. So if you've got a hail ball coming down and it's going 70 miles an hour, it's the size of a baseball, and it's traveling from way up in the sky. I mean, think of it like a pitcher throwing a fastball, and you're getting hit by these. But not only one fastball, there's numerous fastballs, boom, 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 like bombs hitting the ground around you. So it can be a pretty ominous situation when you have a hailstorm. So hail and wind threats, include your personal safety. Like I mentioned, you've got these hail and winds blowing you over, the hail's coming down. You're out in the elements. Definitely have to watch out for your personal safety. Roof damage. This is the big one that people think about when they think of hail. Asphalt shingle roofs are very susceptible to hail. Rubber membrane roofs on commercial style buildings also very susceptible to hail. They have a good deal of damage once the hail comes by. Window siding damage as well. We saw that in the photograph of the siding and of the windshield. Automobile damage. A lot of times if you get a bad hailstorm, it looks like the cars have been beaten in with a hammer. And from my people that I used to work with in claims, a lot of times people will try to do that. They'll try to simulate hail and with a ball peen hammer on both the roof and on the cars to make a claim. But a good adjuster can figure that out pretty quickly. And property damage. I mean, you see in the photo, you've got all these ice balls that are getting catapulted out of the sky. It leads to some pretty horrendous property damage. So what do you do? Again, familiarize yourself with your insurance policy. Understand what coverages you have. If you do sustain hail damage to your property, again, take photos, contact your insurance representative as soon as possible. As I stated before, roof damage is one of the most common and the most expensive types of damage that can occur within a hailstorm. And from your own personal well-being, seek shelter during a hailstorm. Don't be out in the hailstorm, run around with an umbrella thinking that, this is something that's just going to pass, because the pieces of hail can vary in size. It may start off as pea size, and then before you know it, you're to golf ball, and then before you know it, you're to baseball size hails. Again, pay close attention to emergency information and alerts, and move all vehicles into sheltered areas before the storms hit. That's something that you'd want to do with your fleets. You definitely want to have them inside so they're away from the hailstorm. Tornado safety. This is kind of one that's a little more near and dear to my heart as well, being a Midwesterner. Tornadoes are something that we deal with from time to time. I was actually traveling 2 weeks ago up to the west side of Michigan, and I had to go through Indiana, and I was on the Indiana toll road. And on June 12th, while they said they didn't have a tornado sighting, but they had some pretty vicious straight line winds of 80 to 90 miles an hour. They didn't have the tornadic spinning, but the wind was going pretty straight, and I felt like I was in a tornado driving up there. I've been driving for a very long time, and this is the first time I really felt uncomfortable in a storm. I had to pull over under an overpass and wait till the storm left, and it was about 30 minutes before the storm left us. So, the definition of a tornado is a violently rotating column of air extending from a thunderstorm to the ground. It's visible due to the water and dust and debris that it picks up. So you've got this conical shaped mass of air that's moving around, and as it touches the ground, it picks up things. And that's what gives it the color, if you will. Now, the clouds that I was heading into in Indiana, they were very similar to these clouds here. And I did what you probably shouldn't do. I don't know if any of you have seen that video that went viral about 2 months ago of, I think it was in Texas, of the Ford truck. It would have been a perfect advertisement for Ford. The truck got flipped by a tornado, it got flipped back, and then it drove off. So, I did that a little bit, but not on that scale, thank goodness. I was trying to beat the storm and get off the the next exit of the turnpike in Indiana and ended up going right into it. So it's one thing you never want to do is try to beat a tornado. And we'll talk about that a little later. But as far as tornadoes, where do they hit and when do they hit? And we see that in the United States, we have this area in the middle, typically called Tornado Alley. But tornadoes can pretty much hit anywhere. I mean, look at the state of Florida. You know, Florida gets the double whammy. Florida gets the hurricanes and they get the tornadoes. So yeah, they get nice weather, but it also comes with the trade-off. They also get very extreme weather. I live in Ohio, and we're kind of middle of the road. We're kind of on that cusp of the opening up into the Midwest. You'll see mountainous areas don't get as many tornadoes because the mountains block the winds. But the middle of the country, which is wide open, in the plains, get lots of tornadoes. And not so much on the eastern seaboard as well, because there's more mountainous with the Appalachian Mountains, and it blocks the winds down a little bit. But through the Midwest, through the South, and into the upper Midwest, Northeast, tornadoes are very prevalent. So what do you do before a tornado? How to prepare? Well, first of all, you want to identify where your safe places are to seek shelter in the event of a tornado. So tornadoes are not something you want to be outside in. You want to be inside. So you got to understand that, where do I go in the event of a tornado? And those of us that have grown up with this, we identify those storm shelters, and typically they're in basement, they're in subterranean areas. And if you don't have a basement, you want to go to the middle of the building, preferably with a room like a bathroom, which has a lot of, typically a lot of piping and a lot of beefed up walls. Bathtubs are always good places to stay within a tornado. So you want to make sure and ensure your residents know how to access the shelter for their particular building or their particular site. You want to create a disaster preparedness kit as an individual that, if I need to go for an extended amount of time in the basement, I want to have stuff with me. You want to have, just the emergency kit with some Band-Aids, some medical supplies, a little bit of food, a little bit of drinking water, kind of a bug out bag, so to speak. Cell phone chargers, that's a big one. Portable chargers, make sure our cell phones have the juice, because, these are pretty much our lifelines anymore. Everything is accessed through a cell phone. So you want to make sure that that's able to be charged. So after a tornado, before a tornado, you want to make sure that there are all the damaged tree limbs and anything that's not secure outdoors within your authority have been taken off, because once the tornado hits, those loose tree limbs, loose shingles, they're just going to fly away. And you could have prevented possibly different claims by having those things shored up. I think one of the things that we talk about when we talk about tornadoes, we talk about, warnings and watches. And I think there's a lot of misnomers when it comes to, what's a warning, what's a watch when it comes to a tornado. And so, what's the difference between a tornado watch and a tornado warning? And a tornado watch advises individuals to watch and prepare for severe weather and stay tuned to weather broadcasts if they're issued. Tornado watches can cover parts of one state or even a geographic area, several states. So basically, when you have a watch, it shows that, the conditions are right for a tornado. That's the one thing that we always hear on the news here. A watch, it means that everything is setting up so where a tornado could be possible. So that's a tornado watch. A tornado warning is issued when a tornado is either spotted or it's indicated on radar. You can tell with the action of the radar.
The warning advises individuals about the serious threat to life and property to those in the tornado's path. Not only are they able to see the tornado, they're actually able to pinpoint where the tornadoes are typically. So when there's a tornado warning, that's when you really got to step it up. A tornado watch is just, okay, you're fine. I might want to be cognizant that a tornado could happen. But a tornado warning means that somewhere in your area, a tornado has either been spotted physically with someone's eyes, or they've seen on radar that a tornado is present. So tornado warnings can cover parts of counties or several counties that are in danger. So they're more honed in. You actually saw the tornado in County X, or the meteorologists have seen the action on the radar in County X, and so then the tornado warning will be issued for that county and surrounding counties or counties in the path. Whereas a tornado watch is more of a FYI, we could possibly get a tornado because the conditions are right. A tornado warning is, we got a tornado. You guys better take this serious. Let's get down to business here because the tornado is imminent. So during a tornado, what do we do during a tornado? I alluded to this before. You want to seek shelter at the lowest level of the building, typically a basement or a storm cellar. If there's no basement available, like I said before, you want to go to an interior room. Typically a bathroom is always good. You want to stay away from windows. You want to cover your head, neck, and eyes to protect against broken glass, same as a hurricane. You're going to have high winds. The glass could be compromised. It's going to explode, and you can get injured from that exploding glass. Don't use the elevators in case of a tornado. Same way with a fire. You never want to be in an elevator and have the chance of the power going down. Being stuck in an elevator is never good. So you don't want to be in an elevator in a tornado. And you should remain sheltered inside until you're sure the storm has passed, whether it be indicated by the Emergency Weather Service or just by visual sightings. You want to make sure that that storm has passed before you emerge. So seek shelter and stay put. Stay away from windows. Don't use elevators. So those are the things that you do when a tornado is imminent. You see this picture here is the devastation that a tornado can cause. One of the really strange things about a tornado, if you look at the photo that I have up right now, you've got total devastation and destruction here. And that was once a house. And then in the background to the left, you have another house with a couple shingles ripped off. So it really is a strange phenomenon of tornadoes that, you could have a house that's totally decimated here, and then the next door neighbor could look like it's virtually untouched. And it's just one of those bizarre phenomena of tornadoes. But the path of devastation happens when the tornado touches down and it swirls around, and that's what chews up those buildings like they're in a meat grinder. So that's one of the strange things about tornadoes, that people that have experienced them say that they can't understand how next door was untouched and their house was devastated. So tornadoes are typically very bad storms, and I've never personally been in a tornado, but I've lived through a lot of tornado warnings, watches in my life, and it's definitely something that God forbid that anyone should ever have to experience. So during a tornado, again, get inside as quickly as possible. Crouch for protection next to a strong structure, lie flat in a ditch or a low-lying area. Actually, I wasn't quite to that point on my drive through Indiana. I wasn't going to get out of the vehicle, but there you go, bingo. Don't try to outrun a tornado with your vehicle because, one, you're probably not going to do it. And two, you don't know whether the tornado is going to be jumping around. It could jump. You could try to outrun it. It could jump right in your path. So, it's always best to not try to outrun a tornado with your vehicle. All right, what do we do after a tornado? Basically, a lot of the same rules apply in all of these natural disasters. We want to continue to monitor local news, radio broadcasts, social media for updates, make sure that tornadoes passed. We want to watch out for fallen power lines and report them to the utility company. This is, again, a huge one. The wind blows, the power lines fall, the electric gets set loose. Tornadoes are typically also accompanied with rainstorms. So you have water that's standing on the ground, which makes the electricity more conductive. So it's, not a good situation. The same rules apply as when I talked about hurricanes and flooding. You want to stay at 33 to 35 feet away from any sort of power source that's live and is fallen. Stay out of the damaged buildings until the authorities deem it safe to return. Quite frankly, you don't know if that building's been compromised. The building could have portions of it that have been taken out and you're not aware of it. A corner over here could have been taken out and you're in the other side of the building. You want to stay out of that building until it's safe to return. And if you're in the building, if people tell you the other side of the building's been damaged and it's compromised, after the all clear is given, you want to get out of that building. You're not going to want to stay in it because you don't want to have the building collapse after the fact. So that's pretty much it with tornadoes. Tornadoes are extremely devastating. Again, I've personally never lived through a tornado, but I do live in the Midwest, and that's we have a lot of Midwestern. That's a Midwestern phenomenon with Tornado Alley throughout the plains. Moving on to wildfires. Wildfires are unplanned and uncontrolled fires that burn in natural areas but can spread quickly and devastate communities. They often begin unnoticed. It spread quickly due to dry conditions. Since 2000, state and federal agencies have documented an average of 70,600 wildfires per year. While the average was more in the 1990s, wildfires since 2000 have burned more land, an average of 7 million acres per year compared to 3.3 million acres in the 1990s. California is, the wildfire capital of the United States. And there are a lot of reasons for that. You can debate them. You can say, well, it's global warming. And some people say, oh, there is no global warming. Some people say, it's because they don't deforest and they've got a lot of accelerant in there. For whatever the reason, wildfires are real. They're here, and we have to learn how to deal with them. So before, what can you do? Research the frequency and risk of wildfires in your area. In Ohio, we don't have a large propensity of wildfires. So it's something that in your emergency plan, if you're an Ohio housing authority, it's probably lower on your list. If you're a California housing authority, it's probably pretty high on your list. Again, review your organization's business continuity plan. Make sure you have provisions in there for your emergency planning and what to do in case of a wildfire. Clear leaves, debris, dead vegetation, all these accelerants that if a wildfire gets going, it's only going to have more stuff to burn up in your area. Remove tightly spaced trees. The further the trees are apart, the less the fire has for accelerating. Ensure smoke and carbon monoxide detectors are installed and working properly. So during a wildfire, what can you do? Again, pay close attention to emergency information alerts. They'll be tracking the wildfires. They'll know exactly where it's at. A couple of my colleagues out in California, they were kind of cluing me in on how these work. And wildfires are strange. I mean, they'll actually jump across the road. They'll dart over here. They'll dart over there. They're going to go where they're going to go. Fire's a lot like water. Water goes to the path of least resistance. Fire goes to the path of least resistance and to the accelerants. So they're going to do what they're going to do. And, before you know it, and where it comes into where the loss of life happens is you kind of think, okay, the fire's over here. I'm over here. I'm cool. But then before you know it, the fire is all around you and you got no way out except through the fire. So that's where we have issues. So that being said,
ensure that staff and residents are aware of any evacuation orders, because again, you're going to want to follow those protocol when the wildfire is seen a little ways away. When you still have time to evacuate, you're going to want to get out. You're not going to wait till the wildfire is next door. Close building openings. Provide staff and residents with N95 respirators to prevent smoke inhalation if that's possible for your organization. N95s have become pretty common over the last 2 years, as we all know. So you should have a stockpile of them, typically. Turn off the utilities. Fire is fed by gas. So you got gas lines. You need to minimize the accelerants when it comes to wildfires. Fill large containers of water and place them around the property for your own firefighting capabilities. Okay, what to do after a wildfire? Use caution, as hot ashes and charred trees and smoldering debris and live embers can remain after a wildfire. The ground may contain heat pockets that can cause burns. So you don't want your residents or other staff to be burned by residual embers that have been around after the fire has gone. Stay in touch with your local authorities. Wait for instructions. And again, beware that there are a lot of people in this situation, and you're not the only entity that's going through it, and there may be a backlog of call volume. So, heat stress. So it kind of has to do with what we're going through now in the summertime throughout most of the country. This is going to have a little bit of a different take on it. The last 4 things we talked about were all weather events, as heat stress is caused by a weather event, but we're going to focus on what you can do to help out your residents when it comes to being exposed to heat, because heat is a dangerous thing. Extended exposure to heat can cause illnesses like heat stroke, heat exhaustion, heat rash. And, education needs to be provided to ensure that your staff and your residents understand what heat stress is and how it can affect them and how to protect themselves. And we all know that, when we're out in the heat, it doesn't take too long before we start feeling the effects of it. So heat stress, we've got heat rash, which is skin irritation, which is caused by excessive sweating during hot and humid weather. The symptoms are red, bumpy clusters on the skin, blisters. I used to get these every day at football practice when I was in high school and college. And I don't think our coaches believed in heat rash because they really didn't care. Then you have heat cramps, which are muscle pains was caused by low levels of water in the body. So our bodies are made up primarily of water, so we have to keep them hydrated, especially during times of intense heat, because our body is shedding the water rather through sweating. These can cause muscle pain and spasms in the abdomen, the arms, the legs. This is similar to those painful muscle cramps you get, and it's ultimately a sign of dehydration when you have heat cramps. Taking that a step further, we have heat exhaustion, which is the most serious exposure. This is your body's response to excessive water loss, typically through excessive sweating. And we take it to another level here. We get dizzy, we have experienced nausea, weakness, irritability, and elevated body temperature. If you suspect someone has heat exhaustion, you need to cool them with a cold compress, have them drink water immediately, and then take them to a medical clinic because they may need medical attention in the event of heat exhaustion. So how do you prevent this? To protect your employees from heat-related illnesses, one, limit their time in the extreme heat, obvious. Ensure that cool drinking water is accessible at all times, and then provide environments like air conditioning environments where they can go. So to further talk about heat stress and prevention for your employees, implement modified work schedules. Work in the morning, work in the evening. Don't work at the middle of the day. Rotate shifts when possible. Incorporate rest breaks throughout the day. And this chart here is just kind of a chart that we're going to have another chart here in the next slide. It just gives the heat index. And you can see that, you know, in the green area, we've got light work. And then in, you know, we look at the temperatures and, okay, the light work, all of a sudden, you know, when it's 112, even light work becomes difficult to do. So we're talking about areas of Arizona, you know, you're 112, it doesn't matter. Light work has to be, you know, moderated as well. Stress index chart, again, kind of the same thing for those of us that are in humid states. Kansas City, humid place. Cleveland, humid place. Florida, very humid. We have an index so that if the temperature is 95 and you've got 80% humidity, it feels like the temperature is really 136. So we have to be cognizant of the humidity as well, because, you know, it's not the heat, it's the humidity, right? So that's, but it is true. It has a lot to do with how your body reacts to it. You know, heat stress and elderly resident. I think this is kind of, we're going to bring this home here. And this is one thing that I think that all of your housing authorities need to be aware of, because the elderly tend to be most vulnerable to hot weather. You know, younger people are more resilient. As we get older, our body tends to be less resilient. I know personally, I can't, quote unquote, take the heat, if you will, like I used to be able to. As I wade through the joys of middle age, the heat gets me more than it used to. Heat wave can lead to power outages, and elderly residents may not be able to have a cool environment. Fans, air conditioning units may be knocked out because of that. But it's definitely important to check on your elderly residents, make sure they drink plenty of fluids. More tips for staying cool. You know, vacuum and change your air filters and air conditioners. Keep the sun out of your curtains or shades. Use portable fans. Have a backup plan in case of an outage. So emergency generators, make sure those are all in working order. Don't wait until we have a heat wave to say, well, you know, maybe I'll have my maintenance department go fire up the emergency generator, make sure it's working. You want to have that on your regular maintenance schedule, that you do that weekly, you do that monthly. You want to have the generator inspected annually. You want to have it up to date on its maintenance. The generators are like any other sort of internal combustion engine. It takes maintenance. And if you don't maintain your generator, it may not fire up in the event of a power outage. And that could be bad for everyone. So bringing it home here, key takeaways. Ensuring the safety of your employees and residents, protecting against heat-related illnesses and injuries. You know, we talked about preparing for potential natural disasters, including hurricanes, tornadoes, wind, hail, flooding, wildfires. And then we brought it home with the heat stress. I guess if I could leave you with one common theme, is that, you know, it's about using your head, and it's about not taking chances. You know, don't say, well, you know, hey, you know, like me, for instance, when I was 20, I could go out and work in 95-degree heat with 80% humidity and not think twice about it. I can go out there for 2-3 hours and no big deal. Now I can wind up in the hospital. So at 54, I can wind up in the hospital very easily. So just use your head, don't take chances, and, you know, you should weather these storms. Pardon the pun, but you should be able to weather these storms. So that's pretty much all we have here. I'm kind of got a couple minutes here for some question and answer if we want to go through that, if anybody has any questions or answers. But again, coming back to the survey, we've got the QR code here. If you're technologically savvy, you want to scan that QR code. I'm going to leave it up on the screen here. Or we've got the survey link that we can go through to complete the survey on this presentation. And again, you know, we welcome, we value your feedback as our members and whomever else is out there, we value our feedback to make sure that this was worthwhile, that we're able to provide you with good information. So please, I encourage you to take the time to complete this survey. And to wrap it up, I mean, is there any questions? I mean, do we have any questions from anybody out there? Please feel free. If there's not, you can get a hold of me. My email was in the slides. This will also be available on video eventually here once we get it out to you, so you'll be able to watch me for another hour again, or forward it on to some of your staff if you think this has value for your staff. So I'd like to open it up for any questions before I finished. I want to be respectful for everybody's time. I know we're coming up on the hour here.
Greg, we did have one comment, and we did have one comment in the chat from Ms. Jackson, and that's probably why she just unmuted herself. She does have firsthand knowledge and information about being in Louisiana when Katrina hit. So I think she wanted to share a few comments on hurricane prep.
Please, Ms. Jackson, you have the floor.
All right. Regarding hurricane prep, for personal reasons, FEMA has a checklist that anybody can download, which will take you through what to do in preparation to evacuate. It'll tell you what you need to take, where you should make plans. And they suggest also that in addition to taking a plastic box of all your personal or important documents like your insurance policy, they also suggest that you download that to a thumb drive, because if you leave all of that in your house and you should be hit, that's going to be the information that you need to file a claim. Second, regarding housing authorities, most housing authorities at that time did not have an emergency plan, but now it has become something that they do. And there are emergency plans that are available. I know I did one for Illinois where we had a hailstorm and a tornado around us, but not in our particular county. And they tell you how to put together your emergency plan so that you will already have your partners and stakeholders available should a disaster strike. Third, you want to get in touch with your municipality or your local government. If you're a county, every place else, if you're in Louisiana, it's a parish, and talk to your emergency operations manager so that they will be aware of you, because they believe that housing authorities are a self-contained unit and they don't even think about calling you. That's all my information.
Very good. Thank you very much, Ms. Jackson, for the information. That's all good stuff. And we at HAI can also, within our risk control department, help you out with those emergency plans as well, because a lot of housing authorities simply do not have them. I know for the ones that do, you think, well, how could they not? But you would be surprised. A lot of housing authorities do not have an emergency plan or a business continuity plan either. And we could help you with both of those. So please feel free to reach out to myself or any of my colleagues to help you out with those plans as well. So I guess, are there any other questions? Does anybody have anything else? Okay, well, it's been my pleasure for the last hour to go through some things with you, and hopefully that if we help out just one person here, this was a worthwhile hour spent. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming, and have a great day and be safe, everyone. Thank you.